morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your detailed forecast update for January 28th, 2025. A lot to get through today, including torrential rainfall, storms, and tropical cyclones forecast around the Coral Sea impacting the North Queensland area. We'll talk about the tropical situation for Darwin and the Northern Territory as a whole, and also tropical lows forecast to form into tropical cyclones offshore from Western Australia. We'll touch on the severe thunderstorm outbreak as well expected across New South Wales and parts of southeast Queensland. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast, and if you're brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing. But let's get stuck straight into things this morning with a look at what's happening up in far North Queensland right at this time. It is some significant severe weather moving through. I didn't actually expect severe weather warnings to be raised across the northern tablelands area and into the Herbert region of North Queensland. However, they have been raised for locations between Rolling Stone right up north of Innisfail up to about Ballenden Kerr actually for heavy rainfall, and I think they should be raised a little bit further north than that because the rainfall really piping up into the Daintree rainforest at this time. Peak rainfall accumulations over the past 24 hours have been up to 280 millimetres at Ballenden Kerr, about 250 millimetres at Clyde River, and about 220, I believe it was, at Dewayne, just outside of the Daintree rainforest in Mossman. So some significant rainfall accumulations have been reported over the past 24 hours, but we have been saying for the last couple of days that Tuesday was always going to be the wettest of days, and this is still what we're sticking through with the forecast right now, with heavy bands of rainfall expected to continue funneling themselves ashore throughout the remainder of today. In fact, we're expecting kind of a crescendo of rainfall to stream ashore as this low pressure system inches slightly further towards the south and slightly further towards the coastline. In fact, we might be seeing a direct hit on the Queensland coastline in terms of where this low pressure system is going to be tracking, and I'll reference the radar and satellite imagery just to show you exactly what I mean. But you can see in terms of the current look of the radar and satellite imagery, I mean, it's hard to tell of the low pressure system or low pressure center on the satellite imagery, but if you have a look at the radar loop over the past hour, you can see that there is some slight rotation on this rainfall system here, with a very broad center of circulation kind of around here where the cursor is, and this system is going to be tracking in this general direction here. It's of course not even close to tropical low or even tropical cyclone status here. You can see wind speeds of only about 20 k's an hour around the center of this system, gusting a little bit stronger than that, but it really isn't a strong one. But it gives you an idea of how this system is operating. Yes, it does have that low pressure center, of course. We are talking about a full-blown tropical low here, and that's going to be funneling ashore that rainfall as it gets closer and closer to the Queensland coastline. Those intense bands of rainfall heading around that low pressure center will find their way along into the Cassowary coast between Cairns down to Rolling Stone and Townsville throughout the course of this afternoon, and I'm expecting torrential rainfall to fire up between the Cairns area right down to about Ingham, most likely between Ballenden Kerr down to about Tully, with the heaviest falls being around Ballenden Kerr and Innisfail by the looks of things, at least on this forecast here, and they'll be sustained right throughout the course of tonight and into very early tomorrow morning. That's at least the remainder of today in terms of what we're expecting on the forecast here. If you take a look at the convective forecast models, I do feel like the convective forecast models have kind of missed the forecast here, but it is just another snapshot. You can see just heavy bands of rainfall expected to continue streaming ashore. Even though this isn't an accurate look, you can still draw conclusions from it. We are expecting this system to remain a rotating low pressure system and hold itself together structurally speaking, and as such that rainfall will continue to be funneled ashore. The Axis has always done a pretty good job with this storm, and that's the model that I have been using pretty much exclusively, and I think that this is going to be the most accurate representation of how the rainfall continues to funnel itself ashore throughout the course of today. Like I said, those really heavy falls between Cairns down to Rolling Stone, with the heaviest falls being around Innisfail, Tully, Babinda, and up to about Ballenden Kerr and Fishery Falls. That's where the heaviest of rainfall will be, and you can see again it funnels ashore, or gets funneled ashore later on tonight in a really heavy and quite a dramatic crescendo type closing finale type for this rainfall here. We're really expecting some heavy rain to materialize after about lunchtime and be at its worst at about 5 or 6 o'clock, somewhere between Cairns to about Tully, but there'll be heavy falls spread across the Cassowary coast, even up in towards the Daintree as well. They just won't be as heavy as what we're expecting in those areas there. So I'm quite excited to see what rainfall accumulations we are expecting in terms of what's going to be coming through later on tonight. If I had to put a number on it right now, we're probably talking like high 200s, early 300 millimeters in just 6-hour periods. So some really heavy falls are expected to come through. Widespread accumulations between 150 and 250 millimeters are expected over the next 24 hours to the 9 a.m. tomorrow. And again, that's on top of the 150 to 250 millimeters that a lot of these locations have already picked up. So we could be ending up with peak rainfall accumulations in a 48-hour period between that 400 or 500 millimeter mark, and that's widespread rainfall accumulations. With the rainfall that's going to be coming through tonight, I'm expecting spot accumulations between 5 and 650 millimeters. There's going to be some massive accumulations up here, that's for sure. And we're going to have to watch this unfold really closely. I mean, you can see it here on the radar imagery. it really doesn't need much introduction how much rainfall is currently being buried into the North Queensland coastline from this weather event here, and the worst of it's still offshore, but it's creeping closer and closer to the coastline as these hours draw on. Over the next few hours, I forgot to mention this at the start of the video, but over the next few hours, the heaviest falls will be between the Port Douglas and the Innisfail area. There will be still those torrential falls materialising around the Innisfail area, up around the Belendon area, but Cairns is actually picking up more rainfall than I did initially expect from them. They've already got about 100 millimetres in the gauge, with about another 100 millimetres on the way by the looks of things, at least with how things are going to play out for the next couple of hours. Yes, some good rainfall moving throughout the course of today, then it's just going to be residual showers tomorrow, and it looks like tomorrow this rainfall event is going to draw itself away from the Queensland coastline. Some good falls still expected out towards the Daintree rainforest and inland from the Daintree rainforest out Mount Carbine, Laura sort of area, from thunderstorms that will fire up tomorrow night, and we're still expecting some showers to be funneled ashore into the Cassowary coast throughout the remainder of tomorrow, but the rainfall should clear out after about sunset tomorrow, and there will just be a few light showers here and there moving through. A couple of thunderstorms expected on Thursday, and then moving this forecast out further and further, you can see a tropical low forms in the Coral Sea sometime on Friday the 31st of January to round out the month, and you can see that this tropical low here begins to very slowly organise itself and intensify throughout Friday and Saturday. Now this is moving into the next part of the forecast, which we'll get to in just a few minutes, but the gist of it is, after this rainfall event dies off, which will be sometime in the next 48 hours, we're expecting maybe about 48 to 72 hours of dry weather, and then that rainfall will once again pipe up in the far northern reaches of Queensland. So we'll get to that in a later part of the video, so stick around for the next few minutes for that. I just want to briefly touch on those rainfall accumulations for the remainder for the next couple of days. Across the North Queensland area, they are still paramount here. Rainfall accumulations will be the ones that will be the factor that causes all the problems. And you can see 48-hour rainfall accumulations from the Access G3 forecast model, which have been pulled together quite nicely by the forecast model, might I add, in stark contrast to yesterday's abomination of a forecast. Still approaching 300 millimetres along the coastline outside of Innisfail, and I do believe that that is a valid number. And I actually reckon maybe a little bit more rainfall than that is on the cards over the next 48 hours. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the heaviest accumulation, the absolute heaviest of accumulations around Belendon, Bartle Free, we're up to about 400 or 450 millimetres, just with the amount of rainfall that's streaming ashore. But in terms of a general outlook, between 200 and 300 millimetres of rainfall on top of what has already fallen, I think that's a very valid number now for this part of North Queensland. Innisfail's already picked up about 150 millimetres. I reckon in the end they're going to get close to 400 millimetres, so a further 2 to 250 millimetres is possible throughout the remainder of today and into tomorrow morning. Cairns should pick up another 50 to 100 millimetres or so. The majority of that should come through in the next 6 hours. Further north up into the Daintree rainforest, another 100 to 150 millimetres expected there, but that's going to be evenly spread over the next 48 hours. There'll be some good rainfall coming throughout the remainder of this morning and into early this afternoon, and then there'll be good rainfall again tomorrow afternoon and evening, and then heading further north, rainfall accumulations look to be negligible. Inland, outside of Cairns, Mareeba, Atherton and Rainfall, I'm expecting at least another 75 to 100 millimetres to fall for those locations. They've actually picked up some really good rainfall accumulations, and the falls out there were much better than expected, that's for sure, and you can still see some good falls currently happening and moving in there, but you can see it really does stop once it gets over Mareeba, Atherton and down towards Raven, so the rainfall really does stop out here. Just because of the mountainous nature, it becomes a lot more unfavourable. The moisture has all been wrung out by the mountains adjacent to the coastline, and kind of any rainfall outside of Atherton, Mareeba, and especially outside of Raven, so anywhere towards the west of that, the rainfall there is very much a bonus and very special for them, that's for sure. Heading further down the Queensland coastline, you can see Ingham and Cardwell really in the thick of it in terms of the rainfall. They're expecting probably another 200 millimetres or so. Same deal with Tully, probably another 200 millimetres coming through for Tully too. Further south towards Rollingstone, I'm expecting at least another 100 millimetres, but the rainfall is going to continue quite dramatically along the coastline. In fact, just from these showers are going to be swinging in ashore here over the next couple of hours, and they are still on the radar imagery, but they're not as dramatic as what the forecast models are suggesting at this time. I would still expect about a further 50 to 75 millimetres for Townsville, probably about 100 millimetres for Ayr, on top of the whopping totals of 150 millimetres they picked up last night. And I really should have seen that one coming. I was more sort of focusing on the Hamilton Island, Whitsunday sort of area for that kind of picking up the rainfall coming through from the southeast and swinging in there and drenching those areas, but that never materialised. It was always going to be Ayr that was going to pick up that rainfall that was swinging in from the southeast, and they got a line of showers last night that delivered about 150 millimetres in about 3 hours. So some really significant falls were reported around there, and there's a few rivers now that are starting to cause some problems in terms terms of minor to moderate riverine flooding. So we're going to have to keep a very close eye on the air area, a bit of a tongue twister that one, and see what actually unfolds there in the way of flooding. But yeah, rainfall accumulations, they shouldn't be anything too extreme over the next 24 to 48 hours down on the north central Queensland coastline, and even on the North Queensland coastline. Yes, there's plenty of rainfall in the vicinity being pumped ashore by this tropical low, but in terms of bulk numbers, we're probably talking about 30 to 40% of the rainfall already having occurred. The worst that is still to come, and it's going to come throughout the course of today into this afternoon and into this evening, especially around the Innisfail area. So don't get complacent right now. There's plenty more rainfall coming, and this forecast is a best case scenario, might I add as well. It's also a little bit got a bit of an offshore bias that's typical for the axis, but again, like I said, I'm expecting at least another 75 to 100 millimeters for Cairns, probably about 250 to 350 millimeters for Innisfail, about 250 millimeters for Tully, and about 200 millimeters for Cardwell, and 150 for Ingham, and just general areas around there. We'll be seeing spot rainfall accumulations up to 400 millimeters over the next 48 to 72 hours. So plenty of rainfall to go around, that's for sure. Nobody's going to be missing out, that's for sure. Not from a weather event like this. It's turned from showers into solid rainfall, and it really does resemble a tropical low in its formative stages. We're going to keep watching it over the coming couple of days. And speaking of that, let's just push these rainfall accumulations out and spoil a little bit of the video, but you can see plenty of tropical activity expected in the Coral Sea into the first week of February, and as such, some big time rainfall accumulations possible. And we're also going to be talking about the potential for tropical cyclones and tropical lows tracking around the Coral Sea. So let's break down the forecast hour by hour, day by day for you guys right now. I am still inclined to use the ECMWF forecast here, considering the ECMWF has proven to be pretty reliable in terms of, and pretty consistent in terms of its prediction, but we're going to be cross-referencing between other forecast models. So you can see this weekend, especially Saturday night into Sunday morning, we are expecting a tropical low to develop well offshore from the North Queensland coastline. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, that's going to result in plenty of showers being funneled ashore from the southeast and down from the south into the Cassowary coast, especially into the Daintree rainforest. So I'm expecting another surge, a good surge of rainfall coming through on Saturday and Sunday. It will just be from showers, so rainfall accumulations will be very hit and miss, and they're not expected to be anything ridiculous, certainly nothing into the high triple figures, that's for sure, above 200 millimeters, but we still could be seeing some good falls there. This tropical low will then continue to develop throughout Sunday. It looks like it attains tropical cyclone status on Monday and remains a weak system as it meanders for a couple of days in the Coral Sea, pretty much paralleling the Queensland coastline before heading out into New Caledonia or into the South Solomon Sea, well out into the Coral Sea actually towards New Caledonia and Vanuatu, and it begins to weaken off there by the looks of things. Yeah, you can see it kind of races off towards the east and weakens off well out there. In terms of Queensland impacts, it would just be a couple of days of heavy showers materialising along the North Queensland coastline, and then about a day later some moderate to heavy showers and steady rainfall at times around the Whitsundays, and then showers for the central Queensland coastline. We'll also be seeing some stronger winds there as well, probably wind gusts up to 70 kilometres an hour sustained for about 2 days or so, and some big waves also expected into early next week, and that's if that situation does materialise there. And you can see between the other forecast models, yes, the GFS is calling for pretty much the exact same thing. A tropical low developing just offshore from the Queensland coastline, taking its time to materialise. It's achieving tropical cyclone status sometime on Tuesday or Wednesday. The only difference is the GFS is calling for this to actually parallel the Queensland coastline and basically trace it out right next to the coastline. Now, again, this does look like a bit of a problem on the forecast, but let me put your mind at ease. This is a very weak tropical cyclone. It's also moving quite quickly as well in terms of a tropical cyclone. Like you can see here early on Wednesday morning, it's up around the Cardwell area, and then by late Wednesday, it's moving down towards Bowen. So it does have some good forward motion to it, which means even though it will carry some really heavy rainfall, we're not expecting stagnant, consistent rainfall accumulations day on day on day of 150, 250, 300 millimeters plus around the North Queensland area. So that's the good news there. A weak tropical low on the coastline that has some forward motion is about the best case scenario that you could get for Queensland right now that involves a direct impact. So in terms of what is actually expected, the GFS is calling for pretty much a direct hit now in terms of a tropical low or tropical cyclone. It's just a very weak system, and as such, no real direct impact is expected. Now, the axis, I've always said, has been a bit of a wacky model here. It still calls for the formation of a tropical low offshore from the Queensland area, but it kind of intensifies this system quite dramatically and then swings it. In fact, it doesn't really swing it, it belts it into the North Queensland coastline and just funnels in a boatload of rainfall into the Cassowary coast throughout this weekend and into Monday and Tuesday. So this is an interesting situation here, an interesting scenario from the axis G3, and one that I don't think is going to be panning out. So let's talk about what is actually expected, and I do think it's going to be a representation of the ECMWF forecast. I expect on Saturday Saturday and Sunday, we see a low pressure system develop here, somewhere where the cursor is probably a little bit further towards the west from where this low pressure system is developing, somewhere here where I've just pointed that picker, the weather picker. Over the coming couple of days, Monday and Tuesday, the system will slowly get itself together, and it's probably going to be tracking somewhere in this kind of general direction here. It's going to be heading towards the south initially, and then towards the southeast, and recurving away from the Queensland coastline. It could get very close to the Queensland coastline, but I reckon it's going to get to about here and then start to swing away, get pushed offshore by Queensland itself, and then head out into the Coral Sea. I don't really see the situation of a direct landfall being possible, and again, considering the conditions and the environment that the storm's going to be finding itself in, it's going to have a really hard time to properly intensify and get up to a significant cyclone status. And even if it did get towards Category 3 status and stuck well offshore, I don't think it's going to be a problem to Queensland pretty much whatsoever in regards to wind speeds or waves. It'll just be the rainfall threat. And that's kind of what I'm expecting at this time. If this tropical low does develop, which it is looking likely at this time, it's going to track away from the Queensland coastline. And yes, it will provide Queensland with some heavy rainfall again for the far north. It will provide another weekend and into early next week of some torrential falls up there and some very heavy showers moving through, and then into early next week, moderate to heavy falls and heavy showers expected along the central Queensland coastline. But in terms of a direct cyclone impact, the chances are still remaining very low. So for Townsville, Bowen, Mackay, Hamilton Island, anywhere along the Whitsundays, even further south towards Rockhampton, Gladstone, Agnes Water, Bundaberg, nothing expected in the way of tropical cyclone activity. And even around the central Queensland coastline, it's going to feel like a bit of a stretch to call it a tropical cyclone offshore, considering it is just going to be that kind of showery stuff that you guys see pretty much every day at this time of the year. So don't get your hopes up for a tropical cyclone impact. It's looking exceedingly unlikely at this time. And then pushing the forecast forward and forward and forward again, you can see nothing in the way of significant tropical cyclone activity around the Coral Sea. So I hope that puts your mind at ease. There's not a whole lot expected in the way of interesting tropical low / tropical cyclone stuff. It certainly will still be a tropical low offshore from the Queensland coastline, certainly will deserve some coverage, that's for sure. So you bet I will be keeping you updated on the CyclonesOZ channel, so make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already. But in terms of a direct cyclone impact, don't let anyone tell you that a direct cyclone impact is imminent for Queensland. Don't believe much of the stuff that you say on the Facebook stuff, and make sure you always consult the Bureau of Meteorology and multiple sources of weather information for the most accurate and most up-to-date information, because sources can vary along multiple pages, and that's completely fine. That's just how people wish to track storms. But yeah, in terms of Queensland, the tropical low situation, that is pretty much all that I have time for today. We're going to head down into New South Wales and Queensland just briefly and talk about the thunderstorm risk that's going to be unfolding over the coming couple of days. Expecting a good couple of thunderstorms to have a bit of an outbreak across the New South Wales Central Coast and into the northeastern rivers area later on tonight around the Armidale and Glen Innes area. We could be seeing some stronger thunderstorms up there, which would be some good news. They're definitely parched for a little bit of rainfall, so to see a couple of strong cells would definitely be a good sight up there. And it certainly does look like the chance of some severe thunderstorms is going to be imminent there later on tonight, extending across over the border in towards Wollongara and Warwick. Severe thunderstorms presenting the risk of large hailstones, damaging winds, and some very heavy rainfall as well. It looks like a really good day for strong organised thunderstorms across the northeastern parts of New South Wales, and then it looks like a pretty good day as well for squally thunderstorms into the more central regions of New South Wales, extending between Bourke through Cobar and then down towards Parkes, Orange, and across towards Bathurst. And a couple of thunderstorms also possible into the Sydney area. Looks like they're going to have a really warm day by the looks of things, at least on the Axis forecast here. Yeah, well, damn, Sydney's expecting to top into the high 30s. I didn't actually research that. I didn't research Sydney's maximum, so that's definitely taking me by surprise here. And it's probably going to feel a little bit warmer than that as well with these thunderstorms around. So it's going to be a hot one in Sydney with some thunderstorms in the vicinity and probably some squally thunderstorms or some strong pulse thunderstorms later on this afternoon and evening. Some good thunderstorms continuing through Wednesday as well into the Northern Rivers area. The chance of some severe thunderstorms around the Tamworth and the Armidale area with damaging winds, large hailstones, and heavy rainfall. Same deal again on Thursday. In fact, it's going to be 3 days of very similar outbreaks across the northern rivers of New South Wales. So pretty much whatever you get tonight, give or take, you're going to be expecting on Wednesday and Thursday as well. On Friday, these thunderstorms do pipe down a little bit. Still a couple of severe ones expected, but they do look like they kind of let go of northeastern parts of New South Wales on Saturday and then in towards Sunday. But yeah, for the remainder of the week, especially around the Tamworth, the Armidale, the Inverell, the Narrabri, and into the northern rivers area just in general, expecting severe thunderstorms on pretty much every single night, therefore large hailstones, damaging winds, and heavy rainfall. Nothing too crazy, nothing worth writing home about, that's for sure, but we still be seeing some strong thunderstorms up there, so certainly something worth keeping in the back of your head at this time, and certainly could be seeing some good thunderstorms delivering some much needed rainfall up there. So whilst the rainfall is going to be very hit and miss over the coming couple of days into the northeastern parts of New South Wales, those that do get hit with a heavy rainfall could be expecting up to about 50 to 75 millimetres. It's from thunderstorms, so it's very difficult to predict the rainfall at this time. I mean, you can only kind of do that on the day, but I will dive into these in greater detail later on this week, especially Thursday, which is looking like a bit more of a nastier day for the northeast of New South Wales. We just don't have time to because of the Queensland situation at this time, unfortunately. So for New South Wales, any questions or comments, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. It's going to be a hot one, and I imagine you're already feeling it right now. So let me know your concerns or queries in the comment section down below, or flick me an email. There's a link in the channel description, and I would be more than happy to help you out, that's for sure. Over towards Western Australia, just briefly before we talk about the tropical situation for the Northern Territory and WA as a whole, I was horrified to see that extreme heat warning pop up on my phone yesterday from the weather app. Absolutely horrified for it. I'm sick and tired of the heat, and yes, we do actually have some more heat coming through for the southwest corner of Western Australia. It's going to be up into the mid-30s for Perth today. Again, it doesn't really feel like it right now. It's actually a very pleasant morning, and it's going to get up into the high 30s, potentially early 40s again on Wednesday, and same deal for Thursday as well. A sea breeze saves us late on Thursday, but it's going to get warm again on Friday. And in fact, with those westerlies, it looks like it's actually going to be a pretty humid top by the looks of things around the Perth metro area. A top of 37 degrees expected on Friday, warmer still out towards the hills, and up towards 44 or 45 out into the wheat belt, especially into the central wheat belt and into the northern parts of the wheat belt and the Murchison. It's going to get very warm indeed. And those humidity values, like I said, around the Perth metro area, rising again on Friday. So a return to that awful, sticky, hell humid heat to round out January. Thankfully, though, it looks like those temperatures do drop off a little bit just in time for the weekend. And then in time for school to go back next week on Tuesday, starting to warm up, 35 again for Perth, Wednesday 36 by the looks of things, and then looks like Thursday will be a little bit cooler, just to round out the final days of the first week of school for the southwest of Western Australia. But yeah, exciting times, I imagine, for a lot of parents, really stoked to get their kids back to school and a bit of time to themselves. But as it always is around Perth, it's kind of a bit of a running joke at this time. That heat comes just in time for the first week of school, and it is going to happen once again in dramatic fashion, that's for sure. But yeah, great way to end the school holidays across the southwest of Western Australia and just across the southern parts of Australia in general. I mean, it's hot across South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales for the remainder of this week. So back off to the beach and enjoy yourselves. Make sure you do slip, slop and slap. Those UVs are going to be extreme, of course, given the time of the year. But it certainly is going to be some pretty pleasant weather. Hot and dry as well across the southwestern and southeastern parts of Australia. So very pleasant heat, that is for sure. And just before I round out this video, I'm very aware of how long it's run for. I would like to talk about rainfall accumulations across the Northern Territory and Western Australia because they're really starting to build now in the forecast. Yesterday, we were talking about values up to about 300 to 400 millimetres, still approaching that 300 millimetre mark around Melville Island and into the Darwin area and around the northern parts of the Northern Territory, especially the northwestern coast. They're still struggling for a start of the wet season. The Gulf of Carpentaria coast as well, really struggling for a proper start of the wet season as well. And there is still that rumble of activity in terms of a tropical low that could form sometime this weekend and into early next week there in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and then impact the Carpentaria coastline around the Robinson River area later on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday as a respectively powerful tropical cyclone, but it's not being reciprocated between other forecast models, and as such I'm not really putting too much weight onto it and onto the forecast at this time. So whilst there is the chance of some good rainfall around the Carpentaria coastline, and especially in towards the eastern parts of the Northern Territory and the western parts of Queensland, right down towards Mount Isa, the chances of that is there right now, but it doesn't look like it's going to be overly likely, so I'm not going to be saying too much on it, and I definitely don't recommend getting your hopes up either. But yeah, some steady falls expected next week across the Northern Territory, especially in the western part of the Northern Territory, from just showers that are going to be streaming through from the west. Even regardless of if this tropical low or tropical cyclone develops in the Gulf of Carpentaria, there will be some good falls, and you can see it between the other forecast models as well. So I imagine a lot of people across the Northern Territory, this is some exciting news. You guys desperate for some rainfall there, so yeah, make sure you do soak it up because it doesn't look like it's going to stick around for long as well, especially considering we're now well and truly halfway through the wet season for the Northern Territory and Western Australia in terms of, on the calendar at least, we're more than halfway through. So unfortunately, the rainfall there is not going to be sticking around for too much longer. Soak it up while it lasts, that's for sure. I'm sure the garden will be. And just offshore from Western Australia to round out this video, we have been talking about that tropical low / tropical cyclone that could form sometime this weekend around the Cocos Keeling Islands. It's still on the forecast. It's been really consistent over the last couple of days as well. Well offshore from WA, so again, absolutely no threat to land, no threat to Western Australia whatsoever, and even no threat to Christmas Island or the Cocos Keeling Islands either, but it does look like we're going to see a tropical cyclone out to sea by the looks of things, at least as per what the Eastern Weather is saying. But yeah, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we could be seeing, I think it's the third tropical cyclone of the season. Well, that's a really low number, but third tropical cyclone for West Australia, that's for sure so far this season. I really should know that. I mean, look at my channel handle for, for crying out loud. But certainly some interesting stuff, and we'll keep an eye on this system as well. No threat to land, so absolutely nothing worth worrying about out there. But again, this has been one of the longest videos, definitely the longest video so far this year, so thank you so much for sitting through it and watching all of it so far today. I do really appreciate the support as well, and thank you so much for 24,000 subscribers. The support lately has been much appreciated. Road to 25,000 begins now. If you're not subscribed, then please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can also always unsubscribe later if you change your mind. I also do apologize for this video especially. I've spoken really quickly, and I know that's kind of a comment that I see about 30 times a day. I don't do it intentionally. I just have so much stuff to talk about, and if I talked at a conversational speed, basically these videos would be running for 40 or 50 minutes, and that's just not feasible for me or for the viewer either, so I do apologize for that in advance. But yeah, that has been all that I have time for today. Thank you so much for watching the video to this point, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.